This is a topic I was planning on just addressing in one of my update videos, but since everybody is freaking out about all this stuff, I think it warrants a video on its own. Just yesterday, somebody at one of the places I work asked me how I felt about the situation in Ukraine, and I told him that it's a lot more complex than what you are being presented on the corporate media news, if you can call it news. They carefully select what they will present to fit a certain narrative, and that is what they feel is what you need to see. I will hopefully I can get your attention so far, and just take a look at some of this stuff here. Now, this is the Azov Battalion in Ukraine. Look at their flags. Now, look at the emblem. Look at the symbol here, okay? You can see it on their flags. You can see it on the backs of their jackets here. You can see it on the patches. You can see it on their vehicles. Well, what is this Azov Battalion? What is this here? All right, now, World War II history buffs would perhaps pick up on this right away here. And this is stuff that I have mentioned before on my channel here. Now, this emblem of the Azov Battalion, there are two major features to this here. In the background, in white, is essentially the Black Sun. This is the Nazi Black Sun, okay? Not many people saw the mosque shooting in New Zealand, but that guy had this Black Sun on his equipment, okay? And here, this is the emblem of the SS Division Das Reich, and basically it's just like a mirror here, okay? So this is not coincidental, this is very intentional. If that is not enough to convince you to maybe think twice about the situation, look, they even have their own blue and yellow Nazi swastika flags. Now, most people don't understand what this is all about. During World War II, people of Ukraine who were under the Soviets at that time, they viewed the Nazis as their liberators. They were kind of happy because communism sucks. And so they embraced the Nazis as their liberators, and they preferred them, okay? Now, of course, after the war, Ukraine, it kind of went back to the way it kind of was, but there was a lot of resentment towards Russians. Now, I understand that there's like maybe 1/6 of the population that are ethnic Russians, and they are quite mostly in the eastern regions. Now you have these breakaway republics of Donetsk and Luhansk. These are two provinces, I guess you can call them, of Ukraine that they want to claim their independence. And being an American, I understand the importance to want to declare independence from tyranny. And that is exactly what they're doing. However, a lot of Americans, it seems, they are completely against the idea of a country claiming their independence. Now, Crimea voted out of the Ukraine, and that's what they wanted, but that is made like a big deal in the news. But oh my gosh, Russia, Russia, Russia. Well, Crimea River, heart. The news will want you to see the carefully manicured message, okay? And I can't, I wish I had saved it, okay? But this is going back to like 2008, okay? Shepard Smith on Fox News. He was interviewing a woman from, I think she was an American, I can't remember. I'd like to find this video and show it to you, but alas, it is gone. It is buried under the algorithm, or it's quite possibly just deleted. She was being interviewed on Fox News, and she was saying about how she was escaping the escalation there. And she said that it was the Russians that had rescued her. And Shep Smith corrected her and said, no, it was the Georgians. She's like, no, actually, it was the Russians. The Georgians were, we had to get away from them. They were violent and such. And so he cut her off. He went to break. And then when he came back, he gave her a warning, telling her that you better be careful what you say next. And she repeated what she had said, that it was the Russians that had helped her, and then she was cut off again. So the news will just show you what they want you to see. Okay? And the news does not want you to see this Nazi crap. Okay? Everybody who says that I stand with Ukraine just because it seems to be trendy or whatever, you know, we said the same thing back in 1990. Oh my gosh, Kuwait. And there was that young girl who gave a sob story, and her name was Naira, and she gave a testimony to the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus. She was claiming about how the Iraqi soldiers were taking babies out of incubators and leaving them to die on the cold floor. Well, that certainly is a sad story, and that was one of the biggest factors that led the United States into a war in the Gulf. Well, it turns out that was completely fake. She was not in Kuwait. It turns out she was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador, and she had her last name withheld when she gave her testimony. But her name was Naira al-Sabah, and she was the daughter of Saad al-Sabah, the Kuwaiti ambassador. So that really tugged at everybody's heartstrings, and that was, you know, it was totally fake. But that was enough to, convince everybody that we had to go to war with Iraq the first time around. And then, of course, the second time around was the whole weapons of mass destruction thing. And I admit I got caught up on all that stuff, too, at the time. The internet is a really useful tool to educate yourself. And unfortunately, most people, they don't bother to really educate themselves on what is going on. They just kind of take everything at face value. And for those of you who have been watching my videos all this time, you know that I don't trust the corporate media. It's the frickin' worm-tongue media, right? You people are being deceived. So all of this blue and yellow stuff, be careful with what you're doing, because if you say that you're siding with Ukraine, not even a lot of Ukrainian people are siding with Ukraine in this situation. Certainly not the ethnic Russians in the East, and they have been the victims of genocide for the past several years. To give you a rundown, there was supposedly a democratically elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, and there was a color revolution that was basically funded by George Soros and supported by the President Obama's administration. So basically, it was the United States that put these neo-Nazi faction in power in Ukraine. And this is the group of people who have been shelling innocent civilians in Donetsk and Luhansk. Of course, you don't really hear about that on the news because they don't want you to know about that. They want to focus on these stories of how terrible the Russians are. And when everybody has cell phones and anybody can record any of this stuff, we're not seeing this, okay? So the news is showing you some stuff that they want you to see, but if the violence is really that bad, you could be seeing a heck of a lot more of it than when you are being presented on TV. So Nazis do not look like this, okay? And they do not look like this. Nazis look like this, unfortunately, and these are the people who were put into power by the American government. With all of these American politicians, the Ukraine has been kind of like a big sandbox of corruption that these Americans are playing with constantly. And the Ukrainian people are sick of it as well. And it's not just the ethnic Russians. I think a lot of the Ukrainians are sick of this as well. Of course, they don't want the war, but at the same time, their government has been doing a lot of bad things in their own country. Russia has stepped in to hopefully end the violence, and Putin had specifically said that they do not wish to occupy Ukraine, but his goal is to denazify the country, and this is what he's talking about. Okay, so I will end this video with this is a video I found of a Ukrainian guy who was giving his side of the story, and again, this is a lot of stuff that I know a lot of people, they always get pissed off at me because I say things that are different than what the TV tells them. And there's this cognitive dissonance, and a lot of people, they lack the intellectual curiosity to find out what the other side is saying, and to actually research what they're talking about. And because they're very uncomfortable with the idea of possibly being wrong about something, so people tend to lash out about this kind of stuff. So I will leave you with this testimony here. Now, keep in mind, when they're talking about sending money to Ukraine, that money is just going to be funneled right back to the Clinton Foundation and Joe Biden and his crackhead son, so he can spend more money on, screwing hookers and crack cocaine and such, and texting little girls and such. So that is what's going to happen, and this is exactly what the problem is. And the Ukrainians are sick of how their country is being pushed around by not only the United States politicians, but of course the American corporate interests as well. And this guy is going to mention about NATO, and that there is a heck of a lot of bad stuff that you can find out about NATO. Operation Gladio, look that up. That is a whole rabbit hole in itself, where they're talking about these, it was Sybil Edmonds. She was recruited for, I think it was the FBI, and because she's fluent in English, Farsi, and I think Turkish, I believe. Maybe Arabic too, I'm not sure. But the information that she found about, they had these plans for like doing false flag operations and such, really crazy stuff. So she blew the whistle, and she was targeted as a result. But yeah, Operation Gladio. NATO is one big corrupt pile of crap. So anyhow, listen to what the guy has to say, and may the force be with you.
My phone rang at 7:30 in the morning on the 24th of February. The dialer was my American friend from my high school days in the US. He was the last person I expected to call, especially at 7:30 in the morning. I knew immediately that the war has actually broken out. The beginning of the war did not surprise me. In fact, it's long overdue. What surprised me was the fact that he knew nothing about the suffering that the Russian Ukrainians had endured over the past 8 years. Let me get something straight. NATO promised that they wouldn't move an inch to the east. That was a lie. And now we are surrounded by an aggressive military alliance. NATO gladly bombed Yugoslavia under the pretenses of a potential genocide. Did they bomb just military installations? No. NATO destroyed schools, hospitals, bridges, cultural monuments, private businesses, and industrial plants. Did you forget about that? Did you forget about how NATO pumped money and weapons into Georgia right before Georgia bombarded Russian peacekeepers and civilians? Of course you did, because your media doesn't want you to know. Did you forget how yet another territory was ripped away from Serbia? Do you not remember Kosovo? Did you protest then? I bet you didn't, and I bet you didn't even care. Did you forget the invasion of Libya? If you're in Europe, you can't forget. Thousands of migrants are your daily reminder of what your governments did to that country. Did you protest the illegal invasion of Syria by Turkey and the US? I bet you didn't. Do you care about Saudi Arabia starving Yemen? I bet you don't. Do you care, or did you care, about the illegal invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses? What, they aren't people to you? Why haven't you been vocal against the murder of children and civilians at Iraqi and Afghani weddings by American bombardment? Ah, that's right. They're brown people. They're probably worth less to you. Where were your crocodile tears when Kyiv started bombarding Ukrainian Russians in the east simply for doing the exact same thing as the Ukrainians did in the west, was to get rid of a corrupt government? Where were your crocodile tears when Kyiv shut off electricity and water to Crimea? Where was your Save the Ukrainian People when 48 civilian anti-Maidan Ukrainian protesters were rounded into a Union trade house and burned alive, whilst those who tried to escape the fiery hell were beaten and shot? Do you by any chance know who the Madonna of Gorlovka is? Do you know what the Alley of Angels memorial is? Let me give you a hint. People engraved into that memorial aren't alive, and they are not adults. Did you shed even one digital virtue signaling tear when the children at the children's beach in Zagreb were purposefully bombed by the Ukrainian military using illegal cluster bombs? I bet you didn't. But that's okay. How would you? Your mainstream media keeps you in the dark. For 8 years, the US and its allies have been pumping billions of dollars worth of lethal weapons into Ukraine. For 8 years, the Ukrainians have been waging a war with their own people in the east. And for 7 years, Russia and the people of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics have been patiently waiting for Kyiv to adhere to the Minsk agreements. Should Russia have waited maybe 20 more years? You know, the amount of years that the US spent killing Afghanis. So whilst leaders like Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen have been virtue signaling about the poor Ukrainians, they have been robbing the Ukrainians of their dignity, making their economy run on loans from the IMF, and basically robbing them of their future. And Russia is to blame when we were their primary trading partner? The West pushed Russia into a corner. Protect yourself from an increasingly hostile neighbor who wants to become part of a hostile military alliance called NATO and lose Nord Stream 2, for example. Or watch Russian Ukrainians get slaughtered by the thousands. The West wanted to fight this war with Russia until the very last Ukrainian. Remember Kosovo? Well, the Lugansk and Donetsk republics have every right to exist. Russia didn't set the precedent. Your leaders did when they recognized Kosovo. And final food for thought. Why was there no bombardment of innocent civilians in Crimea, even though it's closer to Kyiv than Donetsk is? I'll give you a hint. The actual Russian military was there protecting the people. Here's another. The Ukrainian army has been fighting this invisible Russian army for 8 years now in the east, according to your mainstream media. Why then did the Ukrainian army collapse within 24 hours when fighting the actual Russian military? And since it did, what do you think your tax dollars were doing in Ukraine? That's right. Your tax dollars were used by Ukrainians in the West to kill Ukrainians in the East, and you didn't give a flying fuck about it. So if you haven't been following this conflict from day one, and now you put the blue and yellow flag on your photo, wipe away your crocodile tears, please, and find out why your governments have been supporting those who have made a Nazi criminal, Stepan Bandera, their national war hero. Don't expect a good result from pushing a bear and the dragon into a corner. And definitely don't be surprised when that bear and that dragon begin pushing back. So if you haven't been crying for the collectively millions of dead Iraqis, Afghanis, Syrians, Libyans, Yugoslavians, and East Ukrainians these past 20 years, but you're crying crocodile tears for Ukrainian military installations, wipe them away and think about what your governments have been doing and what they're still doing. And I hope that this 8-year story of a war started by a criminal Ukrainian government against its own people can finally come to an end, and Ukrainians and Russians can finally live in peace.